Right, so folks, we're here with local councillor Ronan Moore, who represents the Social Democrats. Ronan is based in the Trim area.
That's right, yes.
Yeah. Thanks very much for coming out.
Yeah.
You're busy campaigning now at the moment.
Busy campaigning, although I don't know if we have to do a conflict of interest. I think I played football with you back in under 16 days.
That's right, yeah.
So
we were at school, so, Trim.
Trim, I think you used to come over for, you'd be more of a hurler.
Yeah.
So it was a case that maybe you were on a bit of a summer downtime, you play a bit of football at the same time. So,
oh, that's right, yeah.
But I'm in Trim District. That's my area.
How did you get into, like, with all the different parties in the area? You know, Trim would be very strong for one or two of the main parties, whatever it is, and you're with the Social Democrats. Tell me how that came about.
Look, I guess I've always been interested in politics, like a lot of people like yourself, but I was never involved in politics. I worked overseas. I'm a teacher now by trade, but I worked overseas with a troker over in Africa for a number of years and just been involved in the development side of things. And when I came home and started teaching, used to travel, used to be away, and then once you have a family, kids, and you settle down from Trim, grew up there, you kind of take a bit more notice and be involved in the community. So I was always kind of thinking, maybe I wouldn't mind getting involved some way, some shape or form in the community. And around about 2017, there was another party, new party had established in the country, Social Democrats. Catherine Murphy, Roshan Shortall were the two main, I guess, leaders, and became the co-leaders, and now it's Holly Cairns as the leader. Mm-hmm. And when I was listening to them on the radio, on television, I just thought to myself, it makes a lot of sense. I did a master's in sustainable development some years back, and during that time would have learned a lot about, say, the Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and these places. And while they probably have less sunshine than ourselves, although we don't get a lot of sunshine here at the moment, they seem as societies to be fairer societies, and they're based on what's called social democracy, which for me is it's a very Irish thing. Like if you go all the way back into I guess as far back as Brehon laws and so on, and you see how society was organised, it was very much done in a very fair, just way. And so when they established, and I'd heard about this social democracy over in Sweden and places that have really good childcare, good health systems, public health systems, like not private public, but a national health system. I just thought, look, they make a lot of sense. And I was at the time of my life.
Sorry, I know that Norway are reinvesting all their what they're getting, the taxation that they're getting from all the oil. That's all being reinvested back into the country.
Huge.
So there's
massive amount.
Very, very sustainable. And in difference to what Ireland is doing, in some cases, to just keep spending and not thinking about reinvesting and stuff like that so much.
Now, and like the argument, if you go all the way back, you go back to Orna Crusher back, and I teach a bit of history, and you go all the way back in the 20s when they brought in Orna Crusher, like this huge hydroelectric dam. They basically ended up powering 20% of the country, I think, and it was the biggest dam in the world at the time. Yeah. And like, for years there was...
That's outside Limerick somewhere.
Yeah. And for years there was great ambition in terms of house building and around health, and a lot of areas, but it's in the last 20, 30, 40 years, that seemed to fade away. And when I was growing up, and you'd see things, and you just felt, look, that's not the way it should be. And I think some of the larger parties, I feel, have gone away from that. If they were ever like that in the past, they've gone away from it now. It's just left up to the private market. Let the private market decide around housing, let the private market decide around health, childcare, and all these elements where, for me, it's a case of, look, the government has a responsibility to provide these services. A lot of time, these services would have been, a lot of the governments have allowed other groups, sometimes the church to do the work, sometimes local charities to do the work, and have kind of washed their hands of it. So I guess our party, and for what I would believe in as well, I know this is at the national level, not the local level, but the national level, is that we should have a national health service. And that's why kind of Roisin, our ex-co-leader, she headed up Sláintecare, this idea that we have a roadmap to create an NHS type for Ireland. Okay. And we're the only Western country in Europe that doesn't have this. It's taken for granted that we'd have much more money invested in childcare, so people would have a childcare service that wouldn't be costing them an arm and a leg. Yeah. That your housing would be much more done by your local authorities, as it was donkey's years ago. So those are the kind of elements that I guess you kind of base the kind of social democracy, and that was the kind of the party was based on.
Yeah, so. It's the things you touched on there, the childcare and the other things, like they're fundamental parts of building the country up. So the likes of me or you, whatever, families that work and you've young kids, but if you're you have a big monkey on your back of a bill coming in every month. Say if you've like yourself, you've 3 kids, 3 of them are in childcare, and you're bursted. It's like another mortgage, you know.
Same with health, because like I'd meet people in the doors, and like people can be so angry where they're working really hard, paying high tax. But sure, a huge amount of money goes into the health system, which has been dysfunctional for many years. As I said, it took our own leader in opposition to say, right, eventually get every party together to say health roadmap, sláinte care. But a lot of those families working so hard are also paying private healthcare. So they're like, it's almost like you're paying tax for the healthcare system that you don't trust, and then you happen to pay extra money for a private healthcare system. It's like, that shouldn't happen. Like a friend of mine who lives in Sweden, like he was explaining to me how much money he was paying for childcare, and I thought, geez, that's about the same as we pay. But then he was actually, no, that was for the week. It was for a week he was paying this.
Right.
And, like we pay that for, so he was paying for the month what we would be paying for the week.
Right.
And we'd like paying in a large urban area for a week. It's just like, that doesn't make sense. Especially when we're a relatively wealthy country. So and like I'm involved in the Family Resource Centre. I mean, the chair of the Family Resource Centre in Trim 3 years. I'm now on the board again. I was on it for 7 years. And the Family Resource Centre, amazing local organisation that works with a lot of people who might have maybe sometimes some social disadvantage, but other have some other challenges. But they support lots of community organisations as well. But they're doing a lot of work that in other countries it would be maybe state bodies would be doing. Now, they do a phenomenal amount of work. But
is that voluntary? Most of the people
there's 3 people who would be 3.5 would be effectively paid positions, and they'd get funding from TUSLA. But they'd have a lot of voluntary groups, like voluntary members. They operate the food cloud in around the area. And the numbers of people benefiting from that is massive. They operate a low cost counselling service. So like adults and children who might be waiting 18 months, 2 years on a waiting list to get counselling, can actually be seen at low cost because they're providing.
When you say counselling, what do you mean specifically?
So like mental health well-being.
So if
you have a child who might have issues around mental health well-being, and you're a concerned parent, and you're trying to get them to camp, to get them into some HSE provided, you could be waiting 18 months, 12 months for some of these and more.
Well, I'm waiting for. I don't really. It's only when you get involved in these things that you like. I'm waiting for just to get to see a specialist up in Dublin for my leg, and 6 months was the first appointment. Then Robin, my daughter, got sick the day I had the appointment, so I had to ring them, cancel that, and then it was pushed forward for another 6 months. You know what
it's
I mean?
Crazy. Like I met a woman, and like having no doctor services or not being able to access doctor services. Where they're waiting till the GP comes on call at 6 o'clock in the evening, so they can go to the GP on call. And because they can't get a doctor service. I know another woman who just needed to get an occupational kind of health check in order to get part-time work, and couldn't get one. So like wants to work and but isn't able to work because
she can't get started.
She can't get something from a doctor because she has to be a member of the GP service. Like, and there's countless examples of this. And again, like we've had so many years of kind of same governments, and yes, we're some of these things haven't changed the dial at all. So.
What do you see as I know it's not an easy fix, because to me what seems to happen is they just put in a different minister over the HSE, and they do maybe 2 years, and they just get and then the next thing they're gone. And then somebody else, and that's it. And somebody will absorb all the anger of the country for a certain period of time, and they're gone. You know what I mean? Like in the long term, that's not effective at all. That's just musical chairs, really.
No, 100%. Like I think changing ministers, when you think like anyone, like when you think about it, it's a really important job. How long does it take you to get up to speed in the job?
Well, you know yourself. If you walk into school and you're,
it 6 months, 12 months even to get going.
It does. It doesn't even matter how good of a teacher you are, or say if I'm doing construction or whatever it is, and I go to Portugal and I start that. Well, it's going to take me 6 months to understand the systems they have there, or whatever it is.
But the thing is, and I guess for me this is quite important, is that. Like, I know some of the TDs obviously in government departments and so on at this stage, and I'm not saying that they don't work hard. I know the hours that they put in, but I would often equate it to, and look, as I said, we would have played sports together, is that if you had somebody playing up full forward and they've been playing up there for most of the season, and when you look at the results and how effective they've been, it's not a case that the person isn't trying hard. It's just that they just haven't been effective. And I guess my argument, and I guess our party's argument, and I know this is at the national stage, not the local, which I'm running for the local council, but it's time for a change. I mean, there's no point saying, well, who else would you put in? I mean, if you're looking at as those bench, and you have 6 or 7 people who are keen to come on, who have ideas and new ideas, and yet you're going, well, look, we'll keep the same people, and yet we have record homelessness, we have record rents, record house prices. We have a sláinte care that is being brought in, but probably brought in too slow, and we've all agreed on at this stage. You have childcare that still is kind of stop start. Like surely the goodness, now is the time to look at change and say, right, let's bring in somebody else. And it's not talking now. It's just simply people have been there. In the case of Fine Gael, 14 odd years or 15 odd years. Fine Gael, I guess, has been in and out of government for quite some time as well.
Both of them really have just been in government continually for since the state was established. Nearly.
This is it. And I guess if you look at those 3 areas: childcare, housing, healthcare, and there has been some positive changes. I'm not going to discount that, but when you look at those 3 key areas for most people, and housing, where you have people who are 3 generations of people living in the same house because they can't get on afford a home. That's what I'd say is that, look, now's the time to change, because it's just not working. And again, as I said, it's the national and local, but even still, I guess as a party, that's where we would be.
What sort of feedback are you getting from the doors?
So on the doors, it's been generally quite positive, and I guess that's probably one of the 2 things to recognise, because on the one hand, this is the local elections. So what I'm doing, I'm meeting people on the doors, and I guess I'm fortunate to having been working for the last 5 years in the council. What I'm doing is I'm coming up with my leaflet, and I'm saying to people, look, this is what I've been working on specifically in this area or in my time in the council. I'm very conscious that as a councillor, you only have a certain amount of influence. So I'm saying, like, this is what I've worked on, this is what I've achieved. This is not me standing and getting a photo taken in front of something. This is what I've been physically working on, whether it be a family resource centre, whether it be a sustainable energy community I'm involved in, whether it be the Tidy Towns and Trim that I'm vice chair, whether it be involved in community groups over in Enfield and so on. There's a number of places. And I say to people, here's the document. Have a read of this. If you think I've worked hard enough on your behalf, well, then I'm privileged and be honoured if you would give me a number 1 or higher preference as you can. If you feel I haven't worked hard enough, that's fine. So for me, and I think, look, people are busy.
Sorry, I think it's just what you said there now. I think really you can't ask for any more than that. That's
all.
Very
and I give people the information so they can look through it, because when you meet people on the doorstep, oftentimes they're juggling a little kid. They want to come in from work. They want to spend some time. You can smell the food coming in, that they're in the midst of cooking.
And you only have a short space of time to campaign, or in the evening time you're only allowed to...
Well, it's not only allowed, but there's 2 things. One, as somebody who's working, teaching, I don't really have the opportunity to canvass during the daytime. Maybe there's one day where I have a few free classes I can get out. But because I'm based over in Navan, where I'm teaching there, to get over back to Trim for a few hours is very difficult. So usually I would canvass in the evening. And even then, you generally look at between 5 and 8, because that's when people might be home if they're working. And also after 8 o'clock, like people...
they're tired.
And they're tired.
Winding down then.
Exactly. So, and I don't want to take up much people's time. That being said, like, if people have an issue and they want to ask me about something, I'll listen to it and I'll be able to take it down and try and work on it as well if I can. But generally, the response has been generally very positive. For me, it's been positive, thankfully. I think people are aware of what I've been trying to do. I've been keeping people updated as the years have gone on. So, look, hopefully, but I'm not going to take anything for granted. There's a lot of work, projects I'm involved in, and I want to continue to be involved in. So we'll see if we can get back in again in June.
Okay. So talk to me about some of the projects you've been involved with in your time on the council. Now I just saw a note in the paper there last week where we were just talking about one of the issues you raised at, was it a local meeting or something like that, about the
Garda Vet.
The Garda Vet and the complex, how such a rigmarole it is. Can you talk to me about that just briefly for a second?
So I guess there's kind of 2 areas I've been involved in. So on the one hand, at times I use my position as a councillor, particularly at the county level, to try and draw attention to issues at a national level. Now you obviously have to be aware that, look, sometimes you're just trying to draw awareness of this, and you would send a letter in if other councils support what you're trying to say, and then it goes to the national level, and you're trying to really just get the government departments to say, look, hold on a second, this should be something that you should change. So the Garda vetting, as you rightly said, was one thing that I brought up there. It was at the last council meeting. I, like a lot of people involved in the community, you end up having to get Garda vetted on multiple occasions. So I'm a teacher, I get Garda vetted, and I've done a safety force course as well, because I'm working directly with young people. I'm on the Family Resource Centre board, I have to get Garda vetted. I'm a coach of a soccer team, I have to get Garda vetted. I'm involved in a committee of Corlac, who are kind of the youth council of the county. I have to get Garda vetted. I must be Garda vetted about 8-9 times at this stage. And I've been Garda vetted multiple times before that. But instead of just getting one Garda vetting license, you have to get Garda vetted each and every time. So, in say the last 2 years alone, I think I probably had 5 times I've been Garda vetted.
Yeah.
And each of those licenses get vetted individually. They don't take them in and say, well, actually, hold on a second, this is Ronan Moore. Let me look at his number. Yeah, he was Garda vetted, that's fine, and that's it.
Yeah.
Instead, they have to get a new license. And it would be akin to you going driving. Say, if you're driving from, say, Meath down to Kildare, you have to get a new license, not just for Kildare, but every single district that you're going to.
Yeah.
Because Garda vetting is absolutely important, absolutely vital. We have to make sure to safeguard the kids.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But like driving on the road is vital as well. So we don't underestimate either of those. But when it comes to driving license, you sit your driving license to make sure you're competent and you're safe, and you get your driving license, and it does for a certain amount of time. You do Garda vetting, there should be one license for Garda vetting, and that's what I was arguing. Last year, over 500,000 applications were Garda vetted. Now, that's not 500,000 people, 500,000 applications.
Some of them, and most of them are the same.
A lot of them would be the same. And when you consider they've been done, they might be done by the civilian kind of side of the Garda, but they have to access the pull system. It has to be supervised. They have to do it competently, make sure that it's done correctly. That's a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of waste, I would argue. And I would say to get those done, when you do the maths of over 500,000 and you divide that, you're talking minutes to go through this. And I don't know how well they can do that in that short space of time.
I think that this is very relative to particularly parents that are working in coaching positions and things like that. For my relevance to this is I do voluntary work in some of the nursing homes, and I would have to get an individual Garda clearance for every place. And as I said to you there before we started this, like as much as I enjoy doing it, and it's great to be able to go in and do that sort of thing, it turns me away sometimes.
Yeah.
Where I just say, well, look, sure, look, you sort it out or whatever. It's nearly a deterrent.
Yeah. It's like it doesn't make sense. And another one that I brought up as well on the kind of same idea. It was actually the same council meeting. Was related to the issue of water. So there's a lot of water issues across the country. But what has happened now is in Ireland, and the Irish Water, Uisce Éireann, have taken over responsibility for all water. In the past, it was your local council. It would be akin now to the way ESB and gas networks oversee the grid or oversee the pipes. Yeah. But the problem is that if you have an ESB outage here, it would be dealt with. You'll spot it quite quickly online, and it would be dealt with within hours. A very efficient service. When it comes to water, we're having outages oftentimes. Like if there's a huge.
But there's things going on in Trim. I didn't realise it.
For age, same in Enfield as well. But my argument, what I put forward,
does that affect your house?
It does affect us. It affects anyone around Trim. It affects people in Boardsmill. It affects Summerhill because they're all on the same line. There's reasons for it, but the main reason for it is that the current water substation in Trim has to be completely upgraded. Now you'd understand this in terms of when you're working in this area, like. The water station, a substation would take about 25 years would be a life cycle, okay, of a treatment plant. After X amount of years, 20 years, you have a scheme. You'd be basically doing your monitoring and assessments as time goes on, and as you start seeing more and more breakdowns or more wear and tear, you would start identifying and telling the management to say you need to put in place a plan to upgrade it or get a completely new one. And part and parcel of that is going through planning permission, which takes a number of years. That's what happens in a lot of countries. But in Ireland, what seems to happen is that we tend to just keep it as long as we possibly can until it nearly breaks down, and then we start to do it. And what I was putting forward is that as a council, we've now lost complete oversight on our treatment plants. It's now Uisce Éireann entirely. So as Meath County Council, we'll be kept in the dark effectively. And what I'm arguing is that we should have continued oversight so that we can see if some of these treatment plants have reached the end of their life cycle, whether they actually have put in for planning for new treatment plants. Because what has happened in Trim is they've finally said, right, we're going to get a new treatment plant, but that takes 3 years. And in the intervening time, they've done a few stopgap measures, but you're having all of this disruption. And again, because Uisce Éireann are the ones who've taken it over. So there's some of the things that I guess at the national level you might call for. But I guess
that makes total sense, because if you have Uisce Éireann, which is a national body, and they are looking after all these places right across the country, which is a phenomenally big job.
Yeah.
Right? But if you have, a local council, people like yourselves or whatever it is that's watching this, because it's your business, it's your doorstep.
Yes.
You're going to be keeping a keen eye on this all the time, with the idea to make sure that the service continues all the time and the upgrades are put in place at a timely fashion, so there's no there's no stop in service, like what's happening now all the time.
And that affects everything. It affects rates. It affects your commercial ratepayers, who are basically restaurants, pubs, who are reliant on this.
Yeah.
And we're reliant on their rates. So like that affects the whole county. It affects people. If you have kids and you have to wake up to the night, if you have medical needs, if you're on a night saver and you want to use the night saver, which they're telling you should, and you can't use your washing machine or your dishwasher because there has been no water during the night time. So we need to be able to keep an eye on this to say, well, hold on a second. This is telling you, you've got we've seen your plans, and it says you need to upgrade that. There's no point you saying, well, we're going to prioritise someplace over in Galway or Tipperary or Kerry. Like, we're responsible for Meath, therefore you should be putting money in Meath, and we should be aware of that so that our councillors can then be putting pressure on the government level to say, this needs
exactly.
to
Yeah, that's a far more effective. I think it's a far more effective way of looking at things, like what you just said, rather than just shouting a ball at everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At least you have a logical sort of a plan thought out there, which to me makes sense, because like I come from a construction background. I know all about planning and how these things all come about, and you can see the two sides of that, where you can see where the council or whoever is looking after it would just fix that pipe and it'll do it for another while, because the other side of it is a big job. But like yourself there, whatever, is watching the thing and saying, right lads, we need to put planning in this year in order to have a new system in 4 years' time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's.
And in fairness, now we could have both those motions pass. So I put them forward, and I wouldn't put many motions forward because, again, you recognise there's only so much leverage that you'd have at a national level, and it'd be relatively slight in some respects. But both those motions, they made sense. They were logical. They were practical, and they had full support from all the other parties, and the government parties included. Because not every party. I'm kind of lucky that if I have an issue and I want to raise it with my TDs, Social Democrat TDs, I can get in touch with them. But like some other parties that mightn't have the same lines of communication, so some of the government councillors, they'd be 100% supportive of that. They think it makes sense as well. But like I said, that's a national. I guess for me, a lot of the things I've most enjoyed working on, as you had mentioned earlier, like is the local level. So kind of work with the local groups. For me, that's kind of been the most rewarding aspects of it. Because as I said to you earlier, I worked with Troker over in Nigeria for a few years, and when I was there, one thing that I tried to do a lot of was try to add value to the work of amazing organisations that are on the ground. So when I got elected, for me, I was very much like, okay, what are the local organisations that are here, and how can you
add value to it? Yeah,
exactly. So, for instance, like the Tidy Towns in Trim was one example. Amazing organisation that does not just keep the streets clean, but they do stuff around biodiversity and sustainability, around dereliction, streetscapes, residents. They do all of these things. And I went in to the chair soon after getting elected and said, look, I'd love to be able to work with yourself, see what I can do to help. And some of that work was then trying to come up with a few extra little projects, just that little bit extra, where maybe the adjudicators from the previous year had said, you could maybe do this, it might be a good idea, or do this, could be a good idea. And then also work on the application, because the work that the volunteers do, not just in Trim Tidy, but all of the Tidy Towns, is amazing. But sometimes the thing that's not the easiest thing is filling out the forms. Is fatter, that carrot and fat head. It was like, I just didn't want to fill out the forms. Like. So, for me, I've done applications, grant applications, so I was able to work and say, right, a few extra projects. What are you doing? Let's capture that and make sure all of it's in there. Yeah. And like we were fortunate enough that in 2022 we won the national title, and
but that to me now that's a huge achievement.
Huge, it's a massive thing. And again, there's people who've worked in Tidy Towns for years, decades, but decades. So
I was lucky enough to get around the country a good bit, and I see different towns. I was in Adair last weekend, and the place is like a little fairy tale town when you drive into it. You know what I mean? And to think the Trim was in ways superior on the day, across the country is, and it's great. And like you know yourself from living in Trim that, well, in my opinion, we're lucky enough to be living in one of the best little towns in the country. Yeah.
Yeah. Now look, across the board, like there was a number of places, like I think Summerhill and Enfield had won medals as well. I think it was last year, and then a lot of the other villages have improved as well that are involved in it. But like some people go, oh well, Tidy Towns, sure, look, it's flowers and whatever. But it's more than that. I mean, by winning that, they reckon it could be €1 million. Could come into the local economy, people coming into restaurants and cafes and hotels and spending simply to come to see the tidiest town and come as a day trip. That's worth money. That employs people in our community. It brings rates into our council. And like for me, again, it's trying to add value. So soon after that, what we did was we had a Trim Castle Hotel. We hosted an event where every towns and village across the county came, so we could then share some of the lessons learned. Because we knew, look, because people can be quite protective sometimes of the applications, but we haven't won it. We knew we weren't going to win it the next year. So let's add value and say, look, guys, come on and let's talk to you what we did that helped us jump up those extra few points. But there's that. There's another group, Enfield Development Group, and as I said, these are groups that have been working for years on projects. And the Enfield Development Group, for me, Trim, I guess, is very, very biased in some ways because Trim is my hometown.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But I recognise there's loads of other communities that I represent. So Enfield being one. When I grew up, maybe one of the only memories I had of Enfield was going to a table quiz in the parish hall. Which I think we came 4th or 5th or something.
Yeah.
And that was the memory. And you wouldn't really play football. I don't even remember really playing football down in that part of the country. It was always the far side of Navan.
Yeah.
But
these were a better team. We played down there. Portsmouth were down there. Yeah. We played against them and Clonard and different teams like that. You know?
Maybe that was it. But they've got a lot better since then, I guess. But the thing was, I knew the Enfield Development Group were doing amazing stuff. They wanted to try and get community facilities in Enfield.
Yeah.
Long since overlooked, or at least to that developer-led construction going on where you don't have community facilities. And I said to the Enfield Development Group, I said, look, if I got elected in June, could I join you? I didn't want to join 6 months beforehand because it would only be...
Yeah.
So I said, look, if I got elected, I joined them. I'm proud to be the only elected member on the committee. Now, look, that's just me investing the time there. I wish I could be involved in lots of other community groups, which I know other councillors might be involved in. But I involved myself in the Enfield Development Group and we've worked really hard. We have the ESB substation that has now become a library and a community hub. So the council, the lobbying we did towards the council have allowed that to become a library and a community hub. And if I'm correct, today, if I'm right, we have received word from the Town and Village Renewal that we've got $500,000 has been received. That will help us now, again, working with the council, having lobbied them, to turn that parish hall that I would have been at table quiz all those years ago back into a community space. That
I saw that actually today. That was ordered today.
And that's been a huge amount of work where we would have done a huge amount of lobbying, sat down with the council.
How long was that process? Along with that?
So I joined in 2019. I think Enfield Development Group had begun in, I'm going to say 2016 or 2017. There was more than 3 women. There was 3 essential women and a whole bunch of others who were involved. So they've been working on that since 2017, 16, 17 at least. They probably were thinking about it and talking about it for some years before that. So from then to now, 7 years, we had received money from the Town of Village Renewal last year. It was a year before last maybe, but because of construction inflation, we were snookered because it wasn't enough for us to get the work done. So we sat down with the council, who can do incredible work, and said, look, this is what we want to do, this is what we have, how can we figure this out? And we came up with a plan, and now it's kind of reached fruition. So the plan now will be, hopefully that will go.
You see, that's if I was on the council and I had somebody like you coming towards me with that sort of an attitude, you're not going to just blast me out with a load of shouting and roaring. You're going to say, well, look at how can we. That's your job, I've my job, so how can we meet in the middle and try and figure this thing out?
This is it, yeah. And I mean, look, we're lucky. I think in Trim, generally speaking, the councillors, people kind of get on, and people kind of have their own areas of interest that they work on. But for me, as I said, I don't want to be giving out about it. Like at the national level, as I said, we kind of critique policy, but at the local level, it's about trying to get things done for the community. And how you do that. And I guess for me, because of my background, I'm comfortable in the space of working with community groups and saying, right, how can we come up with an idea and where can I add value to that? I'm involved, another one, I'm the chair of a sustainable energy community in Trim. And it's kind of a SEI, probably Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, have helped support these. And we helped a number of homes in Trim a number of years ago get retrofitted, full retrofit. So we helped them put them on a group application of a group up in Louth called Dunleer Energy Team, and we've got a number of homes retrofitted. We've carried out a number of information sessions around energy reduction and so on. And again, there's a good group of people there. We're working really hard to try and come up with ways not only to reduce the energy usage in the town, but by doing that, saving people money. So when we did what was called a master plan, where we kind of looked at the energy usage, we were able to give a number of organisations like the GA Club, a couple of the local shops, one of the schools, a kind of a basic kind of audit, so they could get a sense of what their energy usage is. And I think one or two of those groups now are going further to try and get a larger one, to help them basically reduce their energy, which again saves money, which means less.
That's a big undertaking. To me, it seems like a big undertaking to be able to do that.
Yeah, like it is busy.
Are you talking about, let's say, you're going and more or less do a kind of a BER search for these buildings or these community groups or whatever it is, give them an idea based on a similar system to that BER thing?
Yeah, so the energy retrofits, what we did there was we put it out to see if anyone was interested, and we had a number of people who had said, look, we'd love to try and get a retrofit. Now, what we then did, and the challenge for some people is that all the forms that you have to fill in, how can you trust different operators, and some people might be older as well, like all these different contractors, some do the installation, some do the windows, the doors, the air source heat pump and so on. But we then got them working with Dunleer, who were, they kind of did the administrative work, and they worked with a team who basically did the project management, and they then used generally local providers, either
but then they'd manage the project.
So effectively, the person in the home didn't have to worry about anything. Like obviously, they had to pay a certain amount of money depending on their circumstances and the grants.
And they'd have somebody to liaise with that would say, well, look, this fella's coming today, this fella's coming tomorrow.
Exactly.
All
the forms were filled in, the grant was taken care of, and then the contractors came in. Now, we had a good bit of success to begin with. Now we have the one-stop shops, and they've kind of come in and they've kind of taken that space. So one-stop shops are doing more of that work. So we're kind of changing, but again, we're looking at different ways to try and come up with.
Well, I think it's very relative. I suppose how I would relate to that is my mother's house would have been built in 1979. Yeah. I was abroad and moved back, and I was living with my mum for a while, and you couldn't heat the house. Do you know what I mean? You couldn't. We had the sticks, and we had coal, burning oil all the time. The whole lot. There was a little gas heater then in the room where she'd sleep at night and everything like that. And it was just like there was no end to it. You know, in the winter, then yourself, you think it was never going to stop. So to have that service now, this was a couple of years ago, but to have that service available, for particularly houses that are older, the likes of my mother would have loved to have had that service or that place that you could go to, to be able to say, well, look at that, will you come in here and give me a hand? Because we were looking at that at the time and didn't really. I remember looking at a bit of it online or whatever it was, but it's a bit like looking up at a mountain, kind of. You don't really know which direction to go on, but I think it's great to have that. What you're talking about there, that service that people can go to, especially older people.
Well, this is it, and that's one of the things. And I guess, look, hopefully I'll get in again in June, and I'll be continuing work with the SEC anyway. But we have ideas. There was a few of us attended there was a solar metal workshop there last week. And the idea behind a solar metal is that it's kind of a cooperative system almost in some ways, where you get people to come together in a community who might be interested in getting, say, solar panels, PV panels, and then you get a certain number, and then you work with a number of providers, maybe 3 or 4 providers, and say, right, what discount can you give if you have 5+ people, or 10+ people, or 15+ people? And it helps then 2 things. One, people feel that they're amongst others, that they're kind of doing this together in terms of, okay, well, we're there, we're being looked after. Exactly. And that the hope would be that they would get an element of discount. And then obviously you can come up with a way of deciding who your providers might be based on services and maybe locality and so on. A number of these have already taken place. So we heard different examples of SECs from across the country that are working in this space. So our hope would be maybe that we might move into that. And again, for maybe older people or people who just are busy, mightn't be familiar with this, but are interested. And what has happened there is when you do a number of those, then you do it a second time or a third time, people see the PV panels going up and they recognise the savings that you can make. They're like, actually, hold on a second, I'll do this the next time. We'd love to investigate of looking at other kind of community projects as well around all that whole renewable area. So there's a lot there that we feel as a community organisation that we can do. And again, it comes back to you try to identify where you feel you can add value. That's really what I try to do.
If people want to get in touch with that organisation, how do they do that?
So look, Trim SEC, we have a Facebook page, or trimsec@gmail.com, or just get in touch with myself.
Okay.
The chair.
So let's say my mother's at home and she's like, I don't know what to do about this. What am I going to do? What do you say to her?
So if they want to get into help with retrofitting, I would then say the one-stop shops would be the one group they would go to. So if they just simply Googled one-stop shop and SEAI, there will be a list of one-stop shops. Now these are primarily privately owned organisations that sometimes they're linked to an energy utility company.
Yeah.
And then they might talk to some of these groups.
Yeah.
So,
or first, could she get in touch with, your Facebook thing or whatever it is?
she could, but to be honest with you, if they were looking at kind of a general retrofit, the information I would be given is simply by saying at that stage for retrofitting is to go getting in touch to SEI. In terms of the solar, there are companies out there, but I guess what I'd like to think over the next 12 months or so, we might try to move into the space as well. And if that's the case, if people are like maybe have an interest in the whole solar, but maybe aren't ready to jump yet, get in touch with ourselves, we hold on to the details, and if we get this set up, then maybe we'll let them know, or alternatively even just follow us on Facebook or even follow myself. If we get to the stage where we end up establishing that, we'll be putting the word out there, we'll be getting it off the radio and local media just to let people know, and then try to get people aware and listen to what we're trying to do, and then that person can get on board if they want.
Yeah. I saw one of your posts there yesterday or the day before where you were doing some work with the men's shed.
Yeah.
Talk to me about
that. Well, actually, I called into them. The men's shed are great.
Vincent?
Yeah, I know Vincent. Very good. No, I guess what I've been doing the last few months is something I would have done the previous election, where I go around meeting local organisations. To be honest, which I've supported in the past. But really, for me, is trying to meet community organisations and hear their areas of interest, as well as explain to them what I've been doing. So I would have been in with themselves and had a chat with them, cup of tea. Like, they're amazing organisations. All the men's shed. I know there's women's shed now as well. And I would have worked, like with women's shed, I would have worked with them as well. Helped them in a Grow It Yourself initiative, so they would have got funding from that through a kind of a project that we had been working on some time ago. It's kind of localising Sustainable Development Goal project, and Meta over Cluny had helped fund us and wanted to provide funding for that, and the Women's Shed were able to get money there. And then I called into Prosper Meath, which would be
I've seen that somewhere,
amazing organisation, work with adults with intellectual disabilities, and I would have worked with them on a number of projects. And I guess for me, what I've often said to people, the community, environment, disability and inclusion areas. So I would have chatted themselves. I've done some work in that space around communication boards. I've come across where these are boards where you'd have them in playgrounds, where they are primarily for children who would be non-verbal, pre-verbal. So children who might be on the autistic spectrum, you might see them sometimes have a device where they have images that helps them communicate with their parents, guardians, family, friends. But when you go to a playground, it's not easy. You can't really be carrying this around. So I'd ran this project and a couple of years ago where I asked people for one idea, to come up with a good idea, and I tried to implement it. And a person got in touch, and that led me to talk to this woman with Interact in Trinity College. And she'd been involved in the installation of 2 of these communication boards in a playground in Wexford.
Right. And
I chatted to her and got to understand what the whole thing involved. And I went to the council and I said, look, this is a really good idea. And they said, look, we could probably get funding for one of these. And I said, that's great. If I could get funding for more, could you install them? Because that would be a below-line cost. Construction. The council have their the labour force, they have their machinery. So, and they'd have to install it anyway because it's in council-owned playgrounds. And they said that, we could do that. So I knew, again, Meta over in Cluny, they do a lot of funding in the community. And I asked them, I was in touch with them and explained the project. So I ended up applying to them. And not only did they fund the design costs and the manufacturer costs, they funded the installation costs as well, the below-line costs as well. So along with a guy into the council, we basically worked, Interact Trinity College, myself and the council, to basically develop this sign. The council guy had to go around to every single playground and take photos of the actual playground equipment, because that's also on the board. And we have these boards in nearly every playground across the county, not just in Trim, but in Trim District, because there's Blyver, Trim, Summerhill, and also Enfield, but across the county, and also the Trim Sensory Garden as well. So if a child goes in there who's pre-verbal, non-verbal, they can see this, and they can maybe use it to kind of if they point to maybe a particular equipment that they want to play on, or they might say they're tired, they want to use the bathroom, and so on. And it also just gives more visibility to young children. You oftentimes will see a child might go up and have a look at it and give them a sense that kind of creates a conversation. So again, look, my own experience in this sector, understanding that, you know what, it's all very good to say, oh, we should do this, but the council only has so much money. So if you can actually leverage funds from other places, the council are much more like, okay, yeah. And that's, I guess, what we've managed to do. Even with the Tidy Towns, I've been able to get funding for the Community Foundation of Ireland, another amazing group that funds things within the community. We got funding from Law Pro, Local Authority Waters Programme, to carry out a screening around the Boyne as well. So we've been able to get funding from different places where, look, again, just something I'm kind of familiar with.
Yeah, so and it means as well that you're not just, you know, kind of, for want of a better word, persecuting the council for money all the time.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Instead you can diversify to other places, and it's great that you have that knowledge to be able to do that and go and look for these different things. What is the on the bigger scheme of things with Social Democrats in terms of, you know, I see them there up at the Dáil there, and your leader there, I think she's quite a good speaker, you know.
Yeah.
She's very passionate about a lot of the issues there she brings up, particularly Gaza at the moment, you know.
Yes.
Do you have much of a, like, in terms of, you know, you have an issue here at the local level and your links up to the main party up into the Dáil. How is that?
Yeah, we're lucky. I think we're lucky as a party. I know Holly, and she actually ran for local elections the same year as I ran, and she got in by one vote, would you believe? She lost by one vote. There was a recount, got in by one vote, and then she got the Dáil seat, and now she's leader. And as you say, very passionate. I was kind of an accidental politician in some respects, where she was involved in this disability sector and other areas, and then just found her way into involved in politics. She didn't come from a family or kind of a student union or any of those things. She just got involved. But in terms of us as a party, for instance, I've had people come up to me now in recent times, especially when I call into doors where they've had issues with, say, pyrite maybe, or an issue with, and it's a very specific issue now where they haven't been able to access the government scheme that's available, or a recent one around, say, fair deal and so on, or medical, and I can get in contact with my, and I guess that's probably the benefit of being as part of a political party as opposed to maybe an independent. So I can get in touch with say I was in touch with Roisin Shorthall, because she deals with health, and I said, look, this is a very specific question that I have around medical, a GP card, fair deal and so on, and she can give me all the information on that and make a representation. Pyrite, and get in touch with Cian O'Callaghan, talk about somebody who's not being allowed the remediation because of very specific circumstances that doesn't seem to weigh up, and he's then being able to put in a representation and ask that question. So it's I'm lucky that I have that, I guess, that access with those TDs, that I can get in touch with them or their parliamentary assistants, and they're very responsive, and they can get back to me and put those
so
things
you can deal with these things fairly well then. Where would you, if you get elected over the next term, where would you see yourself going with your? I know you're going to obviously love to work on continuing the projects that you're with. What other things would you? I know along with them, but what would you see?
Yeah, so I guess probably there's a lot of work still to be done with some of those projects. So as I said, I've been in the Family Resource Centre for 7 years. I'd like to continue on with them for another period of time. Because of the fact that they cover such a large part of the district, and they've gone from strength to strength, and to help them to try and get stronger within parts of the community that they might traditionally, because of the financing they might receive from state or from government, to get into. So because they do cover from Atboy, even though that's not in our district, all the way down to Castle Jordan, Ballybracky, Enfield, Longwood, all of these places. The sustainable energy community, I guess there's a couple of projects we're working on there, and so we're still working on those projects. They're in an early stage, so I won't go into much detail, but that's another area that potentially has a lot of opportunity. Tidy Towns, as always, where Communities in Bloom competition that I'm in the midst of the Tidy Town application for this year that has to be in the next week and a half, and then the Communities in Bloom, which is where, because we won the national competition 2 years ago, we now are in the Communities in Bloom competition, which is like the international version of the Tidy Towns. Right. And it's kind of like a Michelin star in many respects. That's
European?
It's international. It's Canada is where where it's kind of based, but you'll have towns and villages from Australia, Italy, Japan, Europe, Americas, you name it. And if you get the maximum amount of stars, then it's kind of like that Michelin. You could be a 5-star. I think it's a 4 or 5 star Communities in Bloom, which again, massive thing for tourism for both Trim but also the area, because the people coming from international, they're not just going to stay in Trim. They're going to stay in Trim. They're going to go around.
Of course.
Enfield, as I said, now that we've got the funding for the parish, the community hall, the next thing is to see the tendering going out, the construction done, and then the whole management of the project. The other areas, I guess, as well, is that look, I've did a number of accessibility studies, mobility studies in Ballivor, along with Summerhill, Clonard, Ramalline, all these places where we looked at the paths and so on, and we did some work on the playgrounds, the boards I mentioned. But I'm only one person, and I put a lot of effort in some places, and I feel there's other areas that maybe people wouldn't have been as familiar with myself at the time. But I'd love to kind of get more involved in some of the other towns and villages, because while at the end of the day, when you look at the votes come in, you'll see that certain areas you might get more votes. But when I see an area that I might not have got as many votes from, for me, that's not me thinking I won't focus in this area. That makes me think I need to double my efforts to really represent those people. And I like the example of Balnabrackie, where I think I got one vote from Balnabrackie the last time around, and that probably played against him at an underage level. But I was like, that's a place I need to do more work in, and I've been engaged with the I think it was the chair of the Balnabrackie J Club at different stages, and kind of work to see if there's any projects I can work with them on, and I might still only get a vote or two.
You might get two, maybe.
Maybe get two, but the point is, these are places that I represent, and whether I'm someone who hails from Trim and I represent Trim in different sports, and my kids might be going to the clubs in Trim, but like there's links with all these places I have, and also I represent them, and that's really what I would hope to do over the next number of years, is to do a little bit more. I now know, as we spoke at the beginning of this, it takes you a while sometimes to get up to speed in a job, whether that's at the minister level, at the highest level, at the local level as well, is recognising what can I do as a councillor, what can I really influence, and I've got up to speed now. I got up to speed after about a year, 2 years into the role, and I feel I've been really effective the last number of years. But I want to then say, right, now that I know what I'm doing very strongly, and I've learned great experience in some places, let me try and bring that out to other areas. And that's, I guess, what I'd like to do in the next number of years.
Yeah.
If people, as I said, might consider me.
It's great to have this chat with you, and like I just recently started following you on social media there, so I wouldn't be up to speed with the stuff you've been doing completely over the last couple of years. But I think that, just from what you're after saying to me there in the last half an hour, or the time we're talking, you're a father with 3 kids.
Yes, that's right.
And you're doing all of these things on top of you, and to me, that's fair play to you.
A bit of job as well, teaching as well at the same time. So thank you. But look, a lot of other councillors maybe in the same boat.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But as I said, it's I really enjoy it. I really love working. As I said, when I worked overseas in development, it was about working with people and trying to have benefits in the community. As a teacher, you see that every single day when you walk into a classroom and you're working with young people. So I do enjoy it. It is busy. I wish there was more of me. I had more hours in the day, but I like to think I've worked hard enough, and hopefully in June I'll get back again. But look,
the idea of what we're doing here, is to give people a good insight into you as a person, who you are, and being a social democrat, what that entails as well, which we went through, and I think you explained it quite well. So look, thanks very much for coming out, and sure, best of luck down the election.
Thanks, Damon. Appreciate that.